First up to the Isle of Wight and David Icke. David, good evening.
Hello, Howard.
Do you mind this tag that they gave you, the potty prophet? I've asked you this before, but just tell me again.
Couldn't give a damn. You know what I mean? So someone gave me some great advice a long time ago that saved me a lot of wasted energy. What do you gain by winning an argument with an idiot? You don't, because you can't win an argument with an idiot. And at the level of the kind of stuff that we're talking about, most of the media, and I worked in it for years, is peopled by idiots. They operate on such a low level of potential perception, or their idea of potential perception and what's possible and what isn't possible. And basically, they're just controlling people by policing the cell of norms, that if people step out of those norms and start talking or doing things in a different way, then they're jumped on if they're in the public eye.
So in other words, you and I have both worked in newsrooms, haven't we, where something a little bit out of the ordinary comes in and you think, well, can we do that story? And then somebody else there, perhaps a little more senior than you, says, that person's a nutcase, we can't do that. And the story either never gets out there or it doesn't get out there in the way perhaps it ought to.
See, what the media do, Howard, is they perpetuate the status quo, whatever the status quo is. If we'd have had today's media back in centuries ago, when people were saying the earth was round, a sphere, at the time when the conventional norm wisdom was that it was flat, then today's media would have treated those people as they treat me and have treated many others who've stepped out of the box. But the trick is not to care. I mean, so what? So some newspaper says this or that about me. And, you know, if we start worrying, this is the prison, to be honest, that most people live in. It's the fear of what other people think.
Well, it's the schoolyard thing, isn't it? And, you know, I have to stand in the middle here and allow, you know, the listening public, as they say in inverted commas, to make their own judgment, and you're up for that, and I'm up for that too. But it is the schoolyard thing where anybody who's any different is the one who gets bullied.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that the fear of being different is what holds people in the prison cell, the mental, emotional, and what you might call spiritual prison cell.
David, hold that thought, because I want to get into your story. Then I want to get into your writings and your thoughts, and I want to get a lot of calls onto you tonight too on 08704 20 20 20. We're talking to David Icke here on The Unexplained. The Unexplained with David Icke and me, Howard Hughes, on air tonight from the Isle of Wight. David he's in a studio down at Isle of Wight Radio, and it's good to have him on too. Been trying to get him on for a while. David, I want to try and work through very quickly your story now. I think a lot of people will remember you doing the sports news on the telly. Of course they will, so it's good that you're here on a predominantly sporting station tonight. But before that, professional footballer. I suppose the question to ask you is, that's a very... People in the sporting realm, quite often, I'm about to make a really sweeping statement here, but they tend to be quite earthly in their view of things. Okay, yeah. The ones that I've known quite a few sports reporters and one or two, you know, soccer stars, current and past. And they tend to take a very, what you see is what there is view. You know, you were one of those people. What changed things for you?
Well, I never was one of those people. And, you know, there are exceptions to every rule. There are highly intelligent journalists who I have spoken with over the years, and there's sort of the many others I've never met. I'm just talking about the general rule. And it's the same in sport. There's some people in sport that do have open minds, but the general rule is that they get, you know, caught in the box. I was always kind of different, if you like. I mean, I was the loner when I was a footballer. I was the loner, really, when I was a television presenter. I tell you what I used to do, Howard. This is how much I was into the media world. I used to have a taxi waiting at Television Centre, revving up by the time the titles at the end of any program that I was presenting were running. And as the titles were running, I was taking my earpiece out, taking my microphone off, saying goodbye to the gallery, and I was off to the taxi. And by the time they were in the BBC bar, I was on a train from Waterloo back to the Isle of Wight. I mean,
so you had it in perspective.
It wasn't my scene at all.
Right.
And I'd always been not looking for something else, but I'd always rejected religion from when I was a kid. which, I mean, I thought about having some T-shirts made, God Save Us from Religion.
And I want to get more into that because I bought your book today. I went into Borders and I bought Children of the Matrix, which is one of your, 16 books.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about religion in there. But go on, you never really bought into religion.
No, and I didn't buy into this idea that what bravely calls itself science says, which is, although evidence is now painted it into a corner in this view, but that we're somehow some cosmic accident, some chemical reaction that comes into existence for a few years and then disappears back to oblivion. I mean, both offers of conventional reality, religion, and in mainstream science just seem both ludicrous to me. But until I had some amazing experiences in the late 80s and particularly the early 90s, I didn't really look at what the alternative was. And I didn't really have to look, Howard, to be honest, because it came and smacked me in the face.
All right, what were the experiences? What happened?
Well, there were loads of things that happened. It would take far too long in the time we have, but it culminated when I was on a mound in Peru, and this I was on my own, and I'd just gone to Peru because I had this real feeling I needed to go Peru. I didn't know why. I spent the last 15 years of my life following my intuition and ignoring what my head was shouting at me. You can't do that. You can't do this. What will people think? And all that stuff. And what happens in the end is the head starts to realize that when you follow your intuition, it may get you into some interesting experiences, but it all turns out brilliant in the end. Not despite what you've experienced, but because of it. And then your head and your intuition start to speak the same language, and this war between head and heart comes to an end. It's a wonderful unity when you stop arguing with yourself and just follow your heart.
But when I listen to you talk, David, and when I read, as I was reading copiously as I could today, your book, the Children of the Matrix, like we said, when I read that, I see somebody who must have spent years researching. This is not just a kind of road to Damascus experience where a bright light flashes and you've changed.
Well, it's not like when you sit in a darkened room. I don't sit in a darkened room and think, I wonder what's going on in the world. Oh, that's what I think's going on. I mean, you only have to look at the books, as you say. But I have to say this. When I had this experience on the mound in Peru, it was in 1991, but it had started before then, but that was the real biggie. Something hit me, an energy, whatever you like to call it, hit me like a runaway train. And for 3 months after that, if you'd have asked me what planet I was on, I would have had to check. It was like the veil had lifted, but there was a transition period when my sense of reality was changing so fast, and the information coming into my mind was coming to the point where if I was a computer, I'd been in danger of freezing.
Now, this sounds to me, we had a woman, maybe 2 months ago on this show called Hazel Courtney. I don't know if you've heard of Hazel Courtney, but she was a national journalist who claimed that one day she walked into Harrods, some bolt out of the blue hit her, she collapsed. It was almost like a brain situation, you know?
Right.
She blacked out, and she woke up having tremendous perception.
Well, yeah, it's not, you see, when this happens to people, it's not because they're special, it's because it just happens. We're living, when I say we, I mean the vast majority of the human race, in a manufactured dream world designed to control us.
We have David Icke here on The Unexplained. He's in a studio in the Isle of Wight, and I am elsewhere, but we can communicate as if we were together here, David. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I was hoping Hereford United would be in that game tonight, by the way.
What do you know about Hereford United?
Yeah.
Did you play for them?
I used to play for Hereford United, yeah. And it was when I got my arthritis and my career finished, which was terrible at the time, a nightmare experience. But without it, I wouldn't be on the journey I'm on now. So I don't regret that at all.
I have to say, Hereford, very, very grounded. Tell me, this is going off at a tangent complete. Very grounded team. I remember I worked in Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Worcestershire for a while on the radio. And one of the things I had to do was periodically go down to Hereford and just do little reports from there. And I was really impressed one morning I was there, and I think it was a Thursday morning, David. You may have done this. And the team, the Hereford United team, were taken on a sort of jog-come-walk around the market in Hereford. And it was part of their morning drill. That's what they did.
Yeah, around the cattle market.
Around the cattle market, yeah. Yeah, very impressed. Yeah. But anyway, we digress.
You always used to always, if you won the toss, you played in a certain direction, or when the wind was in a certain direction. It was very bad for the opposition. you know, because there was a hell of a pong used to come from that cattle market.
True enough.
I can tell you.
It's
Anyway,
all coming back to me, not the pong, you say. All right, so there you are. You're in Peru. You have this great revelatory experience that is a gradual revelatory experience.
Well, it wasn't a gradual revelatory experience, really. I mean, what had happened is in the years from the late 80s, when I was still in the Green Party and working for the BBC, things were starting to happen. Like if I was in an apparently empty room, I would feel that I was not alone. And this went on for a while. And it's a long story, but the point being that once I'd had that incredible experience in Peru, which I talk about at length in one of my books, my life became an unbelievable synchronistic journey in which some hidden hand was weaving the path. And
that phrase you use in the book that I've been reading today, the hidden hand.
Yeah, but there are different kinds of hidden hands. There are hidden hands that are trying to put you on a path, and there are hidden hands that are manipulating this world with grotesque agendas. But the point being that after I'd had the Peruvian experience, there was a 3-month period when my whole being had to go through a process of transformation from what I had been to what I was becoming. And it was in that transformation period, it was only like a 3 months maximum, where I didn't know, what was going on in my life. That was when I appeared on the Wogan show and in all the papers. I was going around as confused as everyone else.
And what did you tell people around you at that time? The people closest to you, not Terry Wogan, the people closest to you.
I was just explaining to them what I'm explaining to you, this is what's happening to me, although obviously in more detail it was happening every day.
But you know that when you say those things to people, a lot of people just don't believe you.
I couldn't give a damn, mate. It's of no interest to me. We have this idea that when we say something, somehow we must be trying to persuade someone. I don't care what other people think, not more than that. It's none of my business what people think. It's theirs. Here's some information. Make of it what you will. It's none of my business what you make of it.
So when did you make the decision that you had a message to put across to other people?
This is not a general election campaign where I'm trying to get people to vote for me. It's not that kind of thing. It's just here's some information.
But when did you come to the decision, okay, this is information for me, but actually I think it's information for other people too?
Well, it's just, unless you've experienced it, it's just something you have to do. And lots of people listening to this program will understand absolutely what I'm talking about because they will have experienced it. It's something you have to do. And after 3 months, suddenly, it was like the storm was over. I was the recognizable person that there was before, this David Icke character. But the way I saw the world was completely different. I looked out of the same eyes and heard through the same ears, actually the same brain. That's where we get our senses from, in truth. But I was seeing the world in a completely different way. And from that moment, I went on this synchronistic journey. It wasn't something that I set out every day, what am I going to do today? It's just the synchronicity of life started over a period of years, putting me in front of people, experiences, knowledge, documents that were not only coming to me in abundance, increasing abundance, but were coming to me in the right order to most easily assimilate and understand.
What was the first thing that you revealed from this material? What was the first thing that you felt, I have to say this?
Well, the first thing that I talked about in that transition period when, everywhere I went was to the sound of either close or distant laughter. And when you go through an experience like that, you either end up in a corner shaking or you step out of the fear of what other people think and say, I am me, I am free. And if you don't like it, well, do the other thing because that's good enough for me. And that's when I realized what freedom really was, Howard. When I experienced not having my life controlled by the concept of reality that other people said I should have because that's what they had. And that freedom is indescribable. You don't go through mental gymnastics all the time thinking, how do I put what I really think so this man won't think I'm mad? What do I keep back in case they think I'm strange? This is what I am. This is what I feel. This is what I think. take it or leave it. You think I'm mad? I'm pleased for you.
David Icke, there's a statement, if ever that was a campaign statement, almost like something from the election. I wish we'd had politicians who'd spoken like that during the election.
We're going politicians are trapped in the box because they fear what other people think, i.e. those that have to vote for them. That's why they never speak their truth. Those that want to, that is.
All right, I want to cherry pick a couple of subjects here because there are so many things that you have talked about and you will talk about that we'll never get through them all. So I'm going to cherry pick just a couple of subjects here. I want to read you a quote here. This was I got this one off a website about you. What I am saying is that my research is very strongly pointing to the fact that the extraterrestrials are not coming. They're not going to invade. They've actually been controlling this planet increasingly for thousands of years. And when I say extraterrestrials, I don't mean all ETs. I'm talking about this particular group. Who, what, where?
Well, the thing is, Howard, the first opening line of the first book I ever wrote on these subjects, called Truth Vibrations, back in 1991, in fact, I wrote it in 1990, said, I am beginning a journey, and maybe you'll come with me. So my journey is a progression. And as you progress, you see things not differently, but you see things from a bigger perspective. And extraterrestrials, what does it mean? Not of the Earth. Well, I would put it more accurately now as interdimensionals. These are, see, the thing is that unless people understand and appreciate the structure of the reality in which we live, and if you put the findings of the various disciplines of mainstream science together, you can see that they've sussed most of it, but they don't talk to each other. And so they carry on with this ludicrous idea that it's all some kind of a cosmic accident.
So you're saying that the scientists have got the pieces of the jigsaw, but you put them together?
A heck of a lot of them, yeah, especially since, if you go into quantum physics and stuff like that, the nature of reality is very simple. And I'm tired, to be honest, of seeing from time to time on television programs these so-called paranormal shows, which are called like Strange But True, that say, I wonder, she's had these extra, wonder what it is, she says she saw a ghost, I wonder what, and they hold the mystery at the end of the show, when actually it's very simple. We live in a frequency range. Even our sight is only a tiny frequency range of what is known to exist in the universe. As someone once said about human sight, we are virtually blind. We live in a frequency range. When you look out of your eyes into what is apparently infinite space, you are looking only at what exists in that space that your eyes can access, i.e. a small frequency range. Within that same space is infinite other frequency ranges that your sight cannot see, but on which teeming life, whatever you want to call it, exists in various forms.
Is this like, a dog can hear frequencies that you and I can't hear? Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly. I mean, you get animals that have a greater visual frequency range that we do, and you will see them react to apparently empty space. And you'll go, what's the cat doing? And the cat's jumping around reacting to something. Well, it's not empty space to the cat, because it can see things that exist in that space, because its frequency range is a visual sight is greater. Now, if I just make this point, at the moment, I am sitting on the Isle of Wight in this radio studio. It's appropriate we're on a radio program. It makes it simpler. In the space that my body is occupying is all the frequency ranges of all the radio stations and all the television stations broadcasting to the Isle of Wight. I can't see them, they can't see each other, because they're on different wavelengths, but they're occupying the same space. If I get a radio here and I tune it to one of them, that's what I get. I move the dial, I get another radio station. The first one that I moved from hasn't ceased to broadcast. It's still broadcasting. It's just that I'm not accessing it.
So
and this frequency range of reality is a frequency range, and that's all it is. So other frequency ranges exist, and other entities and forms of life exist in those frequency ranges and can move in and out of this one. That's when things disappear and appear. I've just seen a UFO. It's just disappeared. What are you on? No, it's not disappeared. It's left the frequency range your sight can access.
All right, so there's stuff out there. Now, this begs the question, you feel that you're in contact, or this is a really bad way of putting it, but you feel that you're connected to this stuff that most of us can't see. Is that what we're saying here?
We're all connected to it. It's just whether we allow it in or whether we don't. You know, it's not, you see, we are all one infinite consciousness, but we're like one infinite ocean of all-knowingness, of love, of wisdom, all these things. Now, we can choose to access that, in which case we will see life in this tiny frequency range we call the physical world in a very different way to those that think this physical world is real. Because most people, and I understand it because that's what we're encouraged to do because it controls us, are pressured to identify who they are with being a droplet and not the ocean. And when you identify with being a droplet, it's, poor me, what can I do? I'm just one bloke. We see ourselves in I can't terms. Now, to those that wish to control us en masse, that is an orgasmic experience. Once people start to wake up and access much more of their infinite consciousness rather than a tiny fraction of it, we start to see the world in a completely different way. And we start to see through the nonsense that we're asked to accept as reality.
All right, I've got a call on now that I think you're going to find interesting because it's somebody who may well have had an experience that you need to know about. This is Michael in Gordon City. Michael, where's Gordon City?
Garden City is.
Oh, it's well in Garden City, isn't it?
Well in Garden City.
Gordon City.
Yeah.
I thought, my God, he's in Canada or somewhere.
No,
Garden
City.
There once.
You're on to David Icke. Michael, what would you like to say?
Gentlemen.
Hello, Michael. All right, mate.
What actually happened, I think it was August year 2000, and I was working in the kitchen, and I locked all the doors, all the windows were closed, and I put the fat fires in front of the door. Now I went on for my break, and I walked up the building. All I remember next, I was on the other side of the room, and I was outside of the door. So when I realized I was outside the door, I realized the keys were still inside the door, and the fryers were in front of the door where I left them. But I can't remember how I got out of the building.
And had you been, tasting alcohol that night?
No, it was early hours of the morning. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I was doing night shift.
Somehow you teleported yourself through solid objects.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't know who David Icke was until the year 2001, and this happened in the year 2002. Now I heard a story back on TalkSport. I can't remember who he was talking to. James Whale.
Probably James. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I thought, well, good God, this has happened to me.
And when that happened, Michael, just before David, you come in, what did you tell people? Did you tell people?
No, I didn't tell anybody. I talked to a security guard called Peter Foster at the time, and he said, you must have climbed for the window, but the window was high up, and that was locked as well. But when I got onto the side of the door, Peter Foster, the security guard, was dumbfounded.
All right, Michael. Well, David, this is right up your street by the sound of it.
Well, this is what this new book that's out in England in about 10 days, Infinite Love is the Only Truth, Everything Else is Illusion, is actually about in so many ways. Its subtitle is Exposing the Dream World We Believe to Be Real. See, we believe, because that's what we're led to believe, that we live in a solid world. And therefore, the kind of stories that Michael has just told are impossible. But we don't live in a solid world. We live in an illusory solid world. If you look at atoms, and of course ask any scientist, what's the physical world made of? Oh, it's made of atoms, mate. All right. Have you ever seen the inside of an atom? There's nothing in it. Someone said, if you take an atom to be the size of a cathedral, then the particles spinning around it are about the size of a 10-cent piece. The rest is, to this reality, though nothing is, empty space. Atoms do not a solid wall make. Our minds do that.
Is this the thing? I once heard a story, and you probably heard this story too, and I don't know whether it's apocryphal, whether it really happened, but it was a story about a baby who turned a tennis ball inside out by ceasing to believe, or not believing because the baby didn't know that the tennis ball was supposed to have the furry bit on the inside and the rubbery bit on the outside, rather, and the rubbery bit on the inside.
Right. Well, if I could just explain something for a few minutes, these things become less mysterious. What we believe is what we create, because the only place that this world we think is around us actually exists is in our brains. And that's only one level of it, because that's an illusion if you go to a higher level. what are our five senses? They are electrical signals interpreted by the brain. As psychological and other research has shown, we receive information, and 50% and more of it we edit. We take out detail that is there and we put in detail that isn't there, and we do this editing process on the basis of our belief in what is real. Therefore, thinking of television, control of the media, education, he who imparts the belief on the people creates their sense of reality, therefore their physical experience. I'll tell you a quick story, an amazing story. Which would put Michael's into perspective in terms of being fantastic. I tell a story in the new book. It was something that was experienced by an author called Michael Tolbert, who wrote a magnificent book called The Holographic Universe, because that's what we live in. And he told the story of how his father had a party for friends, and he brought along a stage hypnotist. The stage hypnotist thing's very, very symbolic in explaining this stuff. And what he did the party tricks, the stage hypnotist. He got this one guy called Tom, and he sat him down, and he got him to eat a potato, thinking it was an apple. Now, what does the stage hypnotist do? He imparts into the person's belief a belief in something. In other words, the belief that the potato is an apple. So because of that, as the electrical signals come to the brain from the potato, they are recoded as an apple, because that's what the brain believes that it is dealing with. And so what happened with this Tom is this hypnotist said to him, when I bring you out from a trance state, you're not going to be able to see your daughter in the room. And so as he did that, the hypnotist put the daughter right in front of him. So Tom's looking into the belly of his daughter. Apparently brings him out of the trance. He says to Tom, can you see your daughter in the room? He looks around. He says, no, she's not here. She's standing in front of him. She starts giggling. He can't hear her. The hypnotist then goes behind the daughter, puts his hand in the small of her back and says, Tom, I'm holding something. What is it? Tom's bemused because it's obvious to him. He says, you're holding a watch. He says, there's an inscription on the watch, Tom. Can you read it? He peered forward. He read it.
Gee.
His daughter is between him and the watch. If we live in a physical world, and which we're led to believe, that is impossible, just like Michael's experience. The fact that we don't, it's all going on in our heads. It's all going on in our sense of belief and in our imagination. And it's not a solid physical world, but an illusory
And it's something you can change. All right, let's leap ahead here, because the next thing that appears to my small brain here is that if that is the case, then if collectively as human beings we believed something else, we wanted to change something, we wanted to make the tsunami not happen or whatever, we could do it. Is that what we're saying here?
Well, of course, anything's possible, because it's all belief. But what I go into in this new book is extremely relevant, because when people and myself talk about creating our own reality by our belief, the question comes back, and it's a very a good one. It's a relevant one. Is okay, mate. And I asked it myself. If we create our own reality, how come that when we both look out the window, we see the same car going past, and I see the same tree on the other side of the road? And I was kind of thinking about this for a long time, but then certain things happened about 6 months ago, which kind of just said, hey, this is what's going on. A friend of mine who is been in health and healing all his life came round to see me. I'd seen him for ages. So we got chatting, and he told me about a paper he'd done on DNA years before that was well ahead of its time. And he said something. He said one of two things. He said, first of all, did you know there's only 4 DNA codes? And every form of life has those same codes, A, G, C, and T. And you know that it's only the way the codes are in relationship to each other that changes the form from a mouse to a human. And did you know that DNA is a receiver-transmitter? And as he said that, it was like someone had got a sledgehammer and smacked me on the forehead. Because
but how does that, David, excuse me for being thick, but how does that tie back into the reality that we see is what we believe it is? How does that tie in?
I'm coming to it. You know, these things can't be explained in 2 minutes when we're dealing about a whole different new reality. What hit me was that the DNA is connecting us like a computer. The body is a biological computer. The DNA is a biological computer to some collective reality which is being broadcast to us in wave form, just like a television programs are broadcast in waveform, and the television decodes them into pictures. The only real difference in theme is that what our brain's DNA do is decode them into holographic, apparently 3D pictures. And so we are like, if you have a computer and you log onto the internet in China or in America or London or Germany, you're logging on to the same collective reality. You can then go around that reality and you then think differently to others about what you think of it, just as we see the same car, but I might like it, you might not. But we're experiencing the same reality, collective reality. And we are living in a holographic version of the internet. Now, just to finish this point, when this book was finished and had gone off to the book designer to be put together as a book, I came across this article and nearly fell off my chair, about Russian scientists who got together with linguists and geneticists and others to try to understand, wait for this if you haven't come across it, what between 90 and 97% of our DNA actually does. Because science calls that vast overwhelming majority of DNA junk DNA, because it doesn't know what it does. And what did these scientists come up with? They came to the conclusion that DNA is a biological computer, which is exactly what I say in the book, coming from a completely different direction. And we are living the Matrix. What was brilliantly symbolized, particularly in the first of the Matrix movies, the illusory world, which is only in our minds and our heads, is like a holographic internet, and it controls us unless we understand the game we're playing, and we can use consciousness to override the program. And that's what people are beginning to do in greater numbers.
David,
that's why they see the world in a totally different way to the norm.
Hold that thought, because this is getting to a very interesting point that I wanted to get to a little later, but we're here right now, and I'm glad we are. David Icke is on from the Isle of Wight. 08704 20 20 20 is the number that you need here at TalkSport. If you want to ask him a question, got a lot of people who want to. We'll be doing that next. You can find out a lot more now with David Icke here on The Unexplained on the Isle of Wight. David, I'm going to get some calls on to you right now, and then hopefully we'll be able to explore a few other things. Let's get to Hugo in Wimbledon in London tonight. Hugo, thank you for waiting. David Icke's listening to you. What do you want to say?
Good evening to you, Howard, and good evening to you, David. The thing that I'd like to ask you, David, is aren't you sort of afraid that over the years, the things that you actually said, that the powers that be may sort of arrange sort of a Princess Di kind of accident or a Dr. Kelly kind of suicide for you?
Well, you see, someone once said years ago, they either assassinate you or they assassinate your character. And there are many ways of trying to undermine people, and they have tried many with me. I don't fear anything happening to me because I control my own universe. We talk about being in the universe, but we all live in our own universe. We may share the collective reality and all see the same basic backdrop, but the actual universe we live in is different. All of us are different. And you can either accept into your universe, into your belief of possibility, in other words, that something can happen to you, and these so-called all-powerful, actually pathetic people can take you out or do that, in which case, because you believe in the possibility, you open up to the physical experience. I don't believe that possibility. No way that I am going to allow my reality to be dominated by anyone to the point where I leave this world at any point before I choose to leave it.
But David, page 136 of Children of the Matrix here is some very heavy stuff about the links between senior politicians like George Bush, Al Gore, Bill Clinton, Henry Kissinger. And this is really dynamite stuff if you read the book.
Exactly,
do you never fear that when you write this kind of stuff...
You want to go on the website every day. It's added to every day, mate. DavidIcke.com.
Well, exactly. And I've seen some of this stuff there today. But this stuff is dynamite, because if you believe this stuff, all these people are linked, and we're talking of, it's not too heavy a word to use, conspiracy here. Do you never fear that one of these days somebody is going to arrange for you to disappear?
Oh, I tell you what I accept is that they'd love it to happen. It is not going to happen. It is not. I will not give my power of reality away to any idea that anyone can do anything to me. So Bad news, I'm going to be around for as long as I choose to be around. And that's not because this David Icke's just a bloody name anyway. I'm infinite consciousness like everyone else. This David Icke's just, it is to identify with a droplet of water. I'm not David Icke, really. I'm the ocean. Like everyone is the ocean.
One of the things you talk about is an assault on our rights and freedoms as human beings and a global fascist concentration camp. What's that all about? What does that mean?
Well, I tell you what, years ago when I talked about this, and I wrote about this, when I talked about the fact that there was an agenda, it's not really a conspiracy. The conspiracy comes in manipulating the agenda into place. The real backbone of all this is an agenda for the centralized control of the planet with a world government, world central bank, world army to impose the will of the world government, world currency, and a microchipped population. Now, when I started talking about this and writing about this in detail some years ago, a lot of people found it funny. A lot of intelligent people didn't, by the way, and even more now. But a lot of people found it funny. They don't find it funny anymore. One of the reasons that there has been an enormous, staggering increase in interest in the stuff that I write about since 9/11 is because a lot of people have started to see that what was written years ago is now happening. The microchip is not some Orwellian prediction anymore. It's actually happening more and more all over the world. That's the idea.
But what about the world government, David? On page, where is it now? Page 336 of the book that I've been reading today, you have the world government at the top of this nexus. Then you have European Union, American Union, Pacific Union all together. Below that, the nation states and the regions, that's us. And below that, last of all, right at the bottom, the people.
Well,
how is that working now?
Well, it's unfolding in front of our eyes, mate. That's how it's working. You see, it's a simple equation. If there's a few of you, and these are this network of interbreeding families that go back to the ancient world that used to be the kings and queens of the ancient world and became the aristocracy and royal families of Europe.
Including our royal family.
Oh, big time. Are you kidding? Anyway, what is the agenda and what is the equation is that when a few want to control the many, fundamental to that is they have to centralize decision-making. The more points of decision-making there are, the more diversity, the less control you're going to have over it. It's like having loads of plates spinning on sticks. If you have too many, you're going to lose control, and there's going to be crashing plates everywhere. What you want, ideally, is one big plate on one big stick, and then you can control that from a central point. So if you look, I mean, the left in politics, and good luck to them, but they've only seen a fraction of what's going on, have discovered in more recent times this phenomenon that they call globalization. What is globalization? It's absolutely the agenda I've been writing about all these years. It's the centralization of power in all areas of our lives, so fewer and fewer people are making decisions affecting the lives of more and more people.
And
this
Tony
is what
Blair,
the European Union's
David,
about.
Well, I was going to get you to that. The new European Constitution, we're going to have a referendum on it.
It's all part of the agenda. Look back, don't just read Children of the Matrix, mate. If you read some of the other books, and you'll see, like, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, the first edition of which I wrote in 1994, and it's in there that this is what the European Union is going to do. I mean, it's not prophecy. Once you understand what the agenda is, seeing things coming is a piece of cake. I mean, the agenda that has been followed by Bush and Blair since 9/11 is actually written down in documents produced by an organization called the Project for the New American Century in America, published in September 2000 and written by the very people that are now controlling the Bush administration.
So much to talk about, David. After the 9 o'clock news, I want to get you on 9/11 because you've got some great things to say about that. You even wrote a book about it. This is Talk Sport. Now, David Icke on the Isle of Wight. We've got 2 minutes to take one question that is nothing to do with 9/11, which I want to get you on to after the news. This is Kate in Wiltshire. Kate, we don't have very long, but David Icke is listening to you now. What do you want to say?
Oh, a lovely place, Wiltshire.
Hiya, I just want to say hello, David.
Hello, Kate.
Hiya, I just want to say thank you very much for all your hard work. It's really changed my life.
Oh,
and
that's nice to hear.
It's absolutely great. I love it.
For the better, I hope, Kate, eh?
All right, Kate, anything particularly you want to ask, yeah?
It's basically, what do you think about the real crop circles? I mean, I'm talking about the really huge, geometrically perfect ones that are just so stunning and beautiful.
And the ones you can only make sense of if you look at them from the sky.
Yeah, those
okay.
are the ones.
All right, Kate, thank you for that. David?
Well, Well, I'm not an expert on that area, but I know there's a heck of a lot of very well done hoax ones, and they've just worked at it and got better. But there are phenomena like that going on all over the world, and other strange phenomena that's happening as well. And one of the things that I learned right at the start of this whole journey for me, around the mound in Peru and just afterwards, was that the world was about to go through a transformation, and it would be a bumpy ride, but it would be a paradise on the other side compared with the prison we live in. And it's interesting, Howard, when you started off listening at the start of the program, all those predictions that are happening now of more and more geological activity. When I talked about the fact that great geological activity was coming in 1991, I was laughed off the street.
And now what have we got? We've got it.
And that's not because I'm a genius or anything, but this information is there to be accessed if you can access the frequency levels that it exists upon.
David Icke.
When I started, I was not accessing the levels I am now, but it was still, the theme was there. Great changes, and at the other end of it, paradise.
Well, I'm glad we got into this, David. Now, after the news for 9 o'clock, I want to get into 9/11, conspiracy theories and terrorism, and your calls to David Icke here at TalkSport on 08704 20 20 20. Across the UK in the night time on a spring night, this is Howard Hughes and this is The Unexplained. We have David Icke on from the Isle of Wight here. And David Icke is a man who talks about the nature of reality. Now, when you hear people say, I want to tell you about the nature of reality, sometimes, I know I feel this way, you think this is going to be complicated. But actually, the way David puts it, it's dead easy. What there is not all there is. You see what I'm saying? What we see around us is not the entire story. There's more to it. And if you buy that concept, if you suspend your disbelief, as they say in the theatre, then you have the gateway to everything that David says. Or David, am I wrong there? Is that right?
Yeah, funnily enough, I've just in the front of this new book, I've got this this quote from someone that says, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world," and that's how we get caught in the box.
Well, you know why that is, don't you? Because if we open our minds to anything else, then it's frightening, it's scary.
But it's not. It's liberating. It's freedom. It's the knowledge there is no death. That all this conflict and fear and all this other stuff, it's all illusory. It's being caught in the illusion that means we experience that. Beyond that, we don't live in this constant world of how do I survive? Frightened of tomorrow. Frightened of the next minute. It's all part of the duality, the division, the conflict is all part of the way that this dream world works. And
I want to get you on 9/11 very soon, but I want to get this call on to you. This is Mark in Farnham, and he's going to do my job for me because he's going to ask you about something that I wanted to ask you about. Mark, David Icke's listening. Good evening.
Oh, thanks a lot. David, just want to say hello to you, and
hello,
great to hear you tonight. Could you just tell the country a little bit about the reptilian agenda, because you've got so much to say about it, and it really is in many ways the hub of a lot of the problems we've got in the world today. Could you tell us something about that, David?
Well, there's so much to say, but let me, for people who are new to this, say that I didn't, in my journey through the last 15 years or so, go looking for stuff like this. It came in my direction. I kept meeting people all over the world, and I've been to more than 40 countries researching this, who told me that they had this experience of seeing someone, usually in positions of power, though certainly not always, turn into a reptilian-type figure and then go back again. Now, when you take, as we talked about earlier, the world to be a solid physical place, this sounds bizarre and impossible, but when you realize it's illusory, it becomes perfectly possible. And this is why ancient cultures have been talking about shape-shifting phenomena for as long as history.
David, why a reptile back? And why not, why not a table?
Okay.
Why not something else?
well, why a table and not a reptile? It's just the way it seems to be. And the thing that I found very compelling was that what these people told me was the common themes of it were remarkably consistent. And then I started looking at ancient texts and accounts and found exactly the same phenomenon. And then I met people like Credo Mutwa, who's become an enormous friend of mine. He's like a film star in parts of South Africa. He's a Zulu shaman. He's 83. He's called a Sanusi. He's at the top of the shamanistic stream. And when after The Biggest Secret came out, when I first introduced this reptilian theme, I went to speak in South Africa, and I got contacted by this guy who he said, we must talk. And he said to me, how do you know this? I said, well, because this is the information I'm coming across. He says this has been in our black African culture for as far back as we know. We call them the Chitahuri, which translates as the children of the python or the children of the serpent. And he said they're the people who are possessing the people in power and causing them to run the world as they do.
So, David, is Tony Blair a reptile? Is Tony Blair a reptile, really?
This is precisely what I was getting from so many other people, insiders, and people who have had this experience. If you ask me a straight question, I'll give you a straight answer. I'm absolutely convinced yes is the answer to that. The Bush family certainly is. There is a common a bond between people in power. It's no accident that you couldn't get a cigarette paper between Blair and Clinton, and then you can't get a cigarette paper between Bush, who apparently is, well, not apparently is, this far bloody right Republican who has this amazing rapport with his so-called centre-left Prime Minister of Britain. Now, the David, reason they speak the same language is someone is giving them the same song sheet.
All right.
And that's why they sing from it.
David, you can understand this, can't you? I'm sure, and I'm not putting something to you that you've never heard before, but a lot of people will buy into what you've said about the nature of reality and think, yes, that's possible. And the frequencies that we perceive are not all there are. Yeah, that's highly possible too. And the more we learn about the world and the more people talk to us on this show, the more we realize that may well be the case. Where they may well part from you is this notion that there is some kind of group of creatures, reptiles, who possess the people who are calling the shots really in this world of ours and have for hundreds of years, more than that.
Yeah, well, first of all, the reptilians operate, it seems overwhelmingly, on a frequency range just outside of the frequency range of our sight, but they can move in and out of this frequency range. This is why so many people I've met have said that these reptilians just appeared out of nowhere because they entered this frequency range.
Didn't Princess Diana believe this as well?
Well, so people who have experienced this on the inside have told me, having never had directly talked to Princess Diana. I did meet her years ago, but in terms of this, then I don't know, but I can only say what people have told me. But in terms of believing it, well, look, hold on a second. I'm sitting in this studio here, and these walls around me appear to be solid. They cannot be, even by the laws of conventional physics in terms of atoms. Now, compared with us living in this apparently solid world, Howard, and apparently experiencing it as so when it cannot be, shape-shifting reptilians is pretty bloody small deal, I would suggest.
Well, if you buy that, yes, it is. But I wonder, as a group of people, right, in this country, I wonder if we all concentrated on something that has happened. I don't know. If we wanted to make something different, something change, then, and I bring you back to a point that we talked about 45 minutes or so ago, we could all get together, believe that the reality of the situation is different, and then it would change, wouldn't it? It has to. If what you're saying is right, that has to be the case.
Well, yes, and you know, the evidence, even mainstream scientific research and psychological research on a deep level shows that.
Why don't we get together and do it then?
Well, because let's go back to a little 5 cents basic. What is the foundation technique of any dictator? Whether it be, this Illuminati network of families or one of their frontmen like Hitler or Stalin.
Well, there's an old Chinese theory, divide and rule.
Divide and rule,
right.
Exactly the words I was going to say. And if you look at society, two things hit you in terms of why we're in the prison. One, society is absolutely, totally structured to entice the five senses. That's what it's about. Seeing and touching and tasting and all this stuff. And once it's not the five senses are not there to be experienced. They're an experience. We're in this world. We're not to ignore we're in it. But if we become totally consumed by the five sense level of reality, which is what this society is structured to make us do, we disconnect from these other dimensional levels of ourselves. And instead of being multidimensional infinite beings who are in this world physically, but not of it in terms of our perception of reality, then we are very difficult to control. But if you're caught in identifying who you are with this biological computer called the body, then you're in real trouble, because you're not experiencing the holographic internet. You are being controlled by it.
So, David,
and the way out
that's
of it,
very
Howard,
depressing. Yeah, well, exactly. What is the way out?
It's not. The way out of it is as I say in this book, everything is consciousness. It's at different levels of awareness. But for the purposes of this book, I define consciousness, to keep it simple, as that level of us that is operating beyond the frequency ranges of the five senses, though that consciousness that is beyond the illusion, if you like. Now, what happens is that we identify who we are with the computer, and I'll say this: part of the computer is our thoughts and our emotions. They're part of the program. It's no surprise or accident that psychologists, people like Carl Jung and many, many others, say that they can break human personalities down to about 12 archetypes and combinations of them. All infinite consciousness, all that is all possibility. So how on earth can they identify 12 archetypal personalities among the human race and combinations of them? Because what they're identifying, Howard, is not infinite consciousness, all possibility. They're identifying the program, the biological computer. And if you take the horse rider symbolism, instead of riding the horse, consciousness experiencing through the body and calling the shots, we identify it so much with the horse that it just takes us where it wants us to go. We are reacting to the biological computer. Someone once said, brilliant line: we are not our thoughts, we are the silence between them. That is infinite consciousness. And the reason infinite consciousness is silent is because it is all knowing. It doesn't think, it doesn't have to work things out, because at that level of awareness, it just knows.
Well, this is all great stuff, David. This is great stuff. This is great stuff, because we have the material here tonight, and you and I could do it on radio in the UK tonight. Enough people listening. We'll all start believing something else, and we'll all start to take ourselves above the realm on which we operate now, and we'll make this country and this world a better place. Can't we do it right now, if it's that easy?
Well, you talk about being that easy. We're dealing with a program that's being broadcast to us, this collective reality, this holographic internet, which we are then decoding. And, it's going to take a lot of people collectively, nothing like half, because of the 100th monkey syndrome, but a significant number of people to change the nature of this reality by accessing this infinite level of consciousness, which we all have, we all are, and expressing that in this world. But that will bring about a collective change. But in terms of individual change, we can do that whenever we choose, because we can access that infinite level of ourselves by ourselves, and our lives will change. Unbelievable numbers of people around the world are starting to have this experience. See, when people go into a meditative state, they go beyond thought and they go beyond emotion. They just are. There's no words for it. There's no label. They just are. Everything just is. And that's where they get their great insights and their great inspiration. The reason is they're accessing the silence of all knowing and not letting the chatter and fear of emotion and thought, mind, biological computer mind, get in the way and disconnect them from the silence of all knowingness.
But David, it's one thing to go there, and it's another thing to rearrange the furniture when you are there. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing to be able to go into that state, and another thing to be able to make your life, your reality, different, better.
Once you access that level, your life changes. I know from experience, not just my own experience, but the experience of endless others I meet all over the world in every culture. This is not a race thing at all. This is about consciousness. The whole race thing is part of the blooming stupid illusion. It's like judging people because they have a different spacesuit. It's just a vehicle for experience. Racism is insane. And it's happening all over the world. And see, we have this phenomenon which has been identified called the 100th monkey syndrome, where they found that once a certain number of a species learn something new, suddenly, inexplicably, but it's not, vast numbers at least of that species started doing the same thing without being shown. What is happening with the 100th monkey syndrome is real simple. And when you realize that the DNA codes, the 4 DNA codes, are common to all life, but, of course, they are the same within actual species. And these DNA codes operate like a broadcast frequency. And so we can communicate between the same species much more effectively than between species because the species are themselves on the same basic wavelength. And what happens is once the animals that have been shown something new learn it, they then transmit that to others on the same wavelength, and suddenly they know how to do it without being shown because they're accessing it from, if you like, the holographic internet.
So it's a kind our crude description of this is telepathy. David, I've got to get you onto 9/11 now because we've only got 10 minutes to cover it. So
just very quickly, this is happening all over the world among humans now, and this is going to transform the reality that we experience. This connection as more and more people spontaneously wake up because they're accessing knowledge that others have put in there.
Well, I think there's something going on, David, because the response to this show is much greater than I feared that it might have been at the beginning. People have tapped into all this stuff. Something is happening out there. I think that is undeniable. The question is, what? And that's what we try to explore here.
Wake up time. That's what's happening.
9/11. Want to get you on
news,
that.
Mr. Blair.
And let me get a call onto you right now about this. This is Linda in Romford. Linda, I'm really sorry to have kept you waiting, but what do you want to say?
Oh, hello, David. Hello, Howard.
Hiya.
Hello. I've been to see you at Brixton, and I've got all your books. I'm always on your web. We've got a movement going for 9/11 Skeptics Group, and we meet every month at Festival Hall up the foyer there every month, and we're doing such a lot to try and get this information out about 9/11. And we was wondering, have you any idea when this is all going to come to a head? We really do want to get this out there. There's so much information that we've got that we would like to air, All
right, Linda, tell me what's the killer fact then that you've got about 9/11? Why is it not what we were told it was then?
Well, it's obvious. It's really obvious. It's the biggest lie ever told, and I'm sure David agrees with me.
All right, David, 9/11. Now, I've had, you know him too, Alex Jones, conspiracy theorist, on talking about this, and I've had other people on here too, talking about the truth about 9/11 and what we were fed at the time. And I covered the story, and I went to the first and second anniversaries at Ground Zero, met the people involved. I have to say, the version that the government, the American government and the British government gave us, I tended to buy, and I talked to the survivors of it, and I talked to the rescuers, and I looked into Ground Zero on 2 occasions. And I have to say that, what went on there I was quite convinced by it. Why is it not so?
Well, not one strand of the official story fits with another. That's a start. Just take a simple thing, just a quick aside, and this is symbolic of the whole story. I spent more than a year, full-time researching this. I went to America, and I talked to people also. I talked to NORAD, who should have responded to those planes, but didn't. I talked to the Federal Aviation Administration about why they didn't respond as they did. And all I got was nonsense. And contradictory stories. What 9/11 was a classic example of a technique that I've been talking about for goodness knows how long now. In fact, I dubbed it problem, reaction, solution. It's been used throughout history, and 9/11 is the most blatant example I've ever seen. It works like this. You want to change society in the sense of, in this case, you want more and more control, more and more surveillance. You want to launch a war on terrorism, which is actually a war of conquest. And you know that if you openly offer this, you are going to get a adverse reaction from much of the public.
Well, nobody's going to want it, are they? Why would they?
So what you do is you play this technique of problem, reaction, solution. When you understand it, you never get duped again. But if you don't understand it, it's a child's play to manipulate vast numbers of people. Stage one, you create a problem. It could be 9/11, a terrorist event. It could be a run on a currency, a government collapse, stock market collapse, a war. You blame someone else for it, not yourselves, obviously, and you give the media the official version of that event. Overwhelmingly, and I've worked in the mainstream media a long time ago, the mainstream media will report to the public the official story. And someone said it, one of the Nazis, the bigger the lie, the more we'll believe it. So something like 9/11 becomes historical fact, not by fact, but by repetition of the same basic story. And the public then receive the official story, undiluted, uninvestigated overwhelmingly by the mainstream media, to which investigative journalism is largely reading the morning papers and watching CNN on the newsroom telly. I've been there. I know what it's like. And the public are being required at stage 2 of this technique to say words to the effect of something must be done. This can't go on. What are they going to do about it? They want fear. They want outrage. They got that on 9/11 and not, understandably so. And that allows them to go to stage 3 of this sting, which is those who've covertly created the problem, blame someone else and got the people to believe it and say do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created.
And David, is that why we've never, heretofore, we have not caught Osama bin Laden? Is that why we haven't got him? Because they don't want to get him.
Well, you look at George Orwell's book, 1984. There's so many things about it that correspond to what's going on now. You see, as we've seen, Howard, with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, often you don't even need to create a real problem in problem, reaction, solution, just the public perception of it for you to be able to offer the solution, in that case, to invade a country on the basis of someone having biological and chemical weapons and having used them on the Kurds, when in fact the country, like America, that is saying we must do something about this is the very country that actually supplied the nuclear and biological weapons to start with. You arm the monster and then you say, the monster's armed, we must stop him. It's all part of the mind game that goes on.
And David, just very quickly, when you saw the scenes as I saw the other day, reported on too, of 35,000 people being evacuated, I think it was 35,000 in Washington, people scurrying around, there being some kind of air threat. What did you make of that?
Now, let me start on that, because that's a very relevant point. There is a no-fly zone, right, over Washington. I know, I read it somewhere. And this week, you rightly say, some Cessna plane flies close or just inside this no-fly zone, and suddenly these jets are launched to sort it out. Ooh, sits back in amazement. I don't remember that happening on 9/11 when, at least according to the official story, Flight 77 headed way back from the Midwest to smack itself into the Pentagon.
And the story we know, but what was the point of what happened on the day then? What do you think?
Well, this is very relevant. You asked me about 9/11. This is very relevant. I went to NORAD, which is the Air Force military response system that's supposed to police the airspace over the United States, and should have reacted on 9/11 to those planes, but did not react in any timescale that had any effect on events whatsoever. I said to them, "Excuse me, you have a no-fly zone over Washington, do you?" "Yes, we do, sir." "Well, who polices it, mate? Do you police it? I mean, how do you stop planes going into the no-fly zone? What's the point in having it if it's not policed?" "Oh, no, we don't police it," they said. "The civilian authority does, which is the Federal Aviation Administration." I go to them. I say, "There's this no-fly zone over Washington." "Yes, sir." "Who polices it? Because the NORAD say they don't, so what you do?" "Well, that sort of thing, round and round." I said, "Do you police it, and how do you do it?" He said, "We react appropriately according to events."
And is that what happened on Thursday?
Not in 9/11, they didn't. And the other thing is, 10 miles down the road, Howard, from the White House and the Pentagon is the Andrews Air Force Base, where the Washington Air National Guard is based to protect the airspace over Washington, 10 miles away. When that plane or whatever it is hit the Pentagon, they didn't launch from the Andrews Air Force Base 10 miles away. They launched from the Air Force Base 130 miles away.
So what you're saying, David, and we're going to have to take just a little break and time out here, just very briefly.
I'm saying it's a lie. The whole story's a lie.
What you're saying to me is that what happened on Thursday proves that the 9/11 thing was a big lie. Okay, stay right there.
No, I'm not saying that one event proves it. I'm making the point.
Helps to prove it. It's part of the
I'm making the point
evidence.
that this week they reacted to protect the airspace over Washington in the way they normally do, but on 9/11 there was no reaction whatsoever.
David Icke, I've loved the last hour and a half. There is a lot more that we can talk about that we don't have time to. Want to get you back on again. If you would like to do this again, I'd be keen to explore some of those other things. You know, the nice thing about you, though, is whatever people might make of what you have to say, I think you encourage people to think out of the box. And arguably, and why don't I damn well say it, I think it is about time as a nation we did that. I think we might be better as a people if we did. But
you've hit it on the head, mate. You've hit it on the head. That's all I'm trying to do.
All right, David.
Trying to do it.
If anybody wants to know more about you and what you say, how do they find out about you? Your website?
My website is davidicke.com. Headlines looking at the news from a very different angle and what's really going on behind it every day. And that's where people can get my books, including Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center disaster, which takes apart 9/11, which is not difficult. 3-year-old could do it. Infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion, is what concentrates. It's out in this country within days, and that's what talks about the stuff we were talking about earlier, about this holographic internet, the nature of reality, and how we can become infinite freedom instead of controlled prisoners.
Real food for thought. David Icke, thank you for making time to do this. This is TalkSport.